Arise now, ye tarnished, ye dead who yet live.
So this is a different kind of video. I've decided to start using this format for some games that I feel would be better suited to. For example, games that have been out for a long time that already have a clear answer of winner or sinner, or games that don't really fit the winner or sinner format, like the game I'm talking about today, Elden Ring. If I made a normal winner or sinner for this, it would be hard to cling on to anything because it's mostly gameplay with the lore in the far background, and all of my jokes would just be montages of my death set to the tune of Another One Bites the Dust. So, Elden Ring. It's hard to introduce this game because everything that From Software makes is so out there. How about this? Elden Ring is the only RPG today that will never hold your hand and will instead kick you to the curb so hard you are sent straight to hell, only for it to pull you back up, punch you in the face, and throw you back down again. Just like it was with Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro. There's a reason that whenever a game in a different genre is hard, it is labeled the Dark Souls of first-person shooters, or the Dark Souls of platformers, because From Software have consistently made games that allow the player the courtesy of giving them the reins and wishing them luck. On top of that, the grueling challenge that I love gives these games some of the lowest lows and the highest highs. So today, after my 123-hour first playthrough, I'm going to look at what makes Elden Ring stand out from all the other From Software games and why it's a winner. This is by far the most amazing world that From Software has created. The sheer variety of different environments for this game is astonishing. One second you could be in a sea full of scarlet rot. I died here like 20 times. The next second you could be in a dreamlike ethereal landscape. I died here like 40 times. Or a ruined city in the sky surrounded by tornadoes. I lost count of how many times I died here. I've told multiple people that I will catch myself just staring at the environments for a few minutes when I first enter it because it's just so breathtaking. I can't imagine the time that it took to create such detailed worlds. But these detailed worlds would mean nothing if the world was an empty shell. Thankfully, the world is alive in many different ways. Around every corner lies an encampment with people relaxing, traveling merchants looking to sell, or gigantic trolls pulling huge carts surrounded by armies. Most of these things are trying to kill you, but I would rather have that than a barren wasteland with nothing to see. New to the Souls series though are docile animals that roam the land. These are basically here just for crafting materials, but these animals add even more to the already alive and beautiful world. I think I can very easily say that this world is From Software's magnum opus, and the ways that they use this world, or this open world, has blown me away. If someone were to ask me to describe the world design of the Souls series in terms of linear versus open design, I would have told them that they were open world games. However, since Elden Ring's release, I now realize that Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro all fall somewhere in between, with not exactly being linear, but definitely not being an open world either. Elden Ring is the definition of open world and then some. There's this incredible moment near the beginning of the game where you are already exploring what seems to be a fairly large world from what you can see of the grayed out areas on the map, and then you open up a chest and your mimic PTSD kicks in because it's a trap chest you just opened. This chest, however, transports you to a random part of the map. You realize what just happened? You open up the map and holy shit, the map just expanded by over double its size. It's this fantastic aha moment where you were just blown away at the sheer size of this world, and I think that was exactly From Software's intent. So how does From Software fill such a large world like this? Well, that's actually a really interesting question, and the answer can be found by looking at a different world. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. A very highly regarded game by many people. I never thought I'd be comparing Breath of the Wild to one of the hardest games of all time, but here we are. 90 to 95% of the content in Breath of the Wild's world is completely optional. In fact, after you complete the tutorial island, you can go straight to the final boss, which will evidently be a lot harder because you skipped all the dungeons, but the fact of the matter is that you can do it. Elden Ring is not only similar in the way the game opens on a sprawling landscape, but it also uses the same principle of optional content. About 80 to 85% in Elden Ring is optional, and the rest is legacy dungeons, which are the normal Dark Souls areas. The optional content includes mini dungeons, open world bosses, ruins, and much more. I love this approach to open world design. It gives the player even more freedom to choose what they want to do. If I want to go straight to the legacy dungeon of the area and fight the boss there without exploring, then I can do that. I might get absolutely destroyed doing this, but it's an option. If I want to explore the area before going to the legacy dungeon, which in turn would allow me to level up and find better equipment to help me with the boss, then I can do that as well. It's all about what the player wants to do and not about what the developer wants you to do, and that is fantastic design. With this fantastic design, there is a lot to do in this game, which means there is a lot of combat as well. The combat of Elden Ring has the same high reaction gameplay as Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. However, the Dark Souls combat has a lot less variety to it. Don't get me wrong, the Souls games all have normal attacks, heavy attacks, jump attacks, kicks, and more. The problem is that it's almost always more beneficial just to use the normal attacks than anything else. Sure, a heavy attack will do more damage, but will take a lot longer and will leave you open to getting hit. Jump attacks and kicks have also always felt super inconsistent to me. What I'm trying to say is that the normal R1 attacks seem to be the best option at almost all times in Dark Souls. In Elden Ring, however, these attacks, other than the normal ones, actually do something super useful. Doing jumping attacks that are now super consistent with a dedicated jump button, heavy attacks, or a new super satisfying counterattack will build up an invisible stagger bar on enemies that, when broken, will allow you to get a massive and free stagger attack. Having something like this means that using everything on a weapon is not only viable, but it's basically recommended to get these free staggers. The days of constantly spamming R1 are over. On top of these new and updated movesets, Elden Ring has some of the greatest variety in terms of builds for combat. Strength builds, incantation builds, bleed builds, sorcery builds, dex builds, frost builds, broken as shit builds, dual wielding, sword and shield, staffs, seals, hammers, spears, bows, crossbows, flails, axes, Wolverine claws. You can literally put together so many different combinations into so many different builds and make your character whatever you want it to be. Then, you can take that character and throw it against all the different bosses in the game. If there's one thing that the Soulsborne series is known for, then it's ridiculously crazy bosses. Elden Ring is no different, and I can safely say that it also has some of my favorite bosses in all the games. I'm just going to use this section to list some of my favorite bosses in the game and why. Renala's first phase was kind of just because it was so quick and easy, but her second phase takes place in probably my favorite arena in a Souls game. A vast pool of water illuminated by a gigantic moon was just a crazy cool place to fight the Queen of the Full Moon. Rykard was a pretty easy fight just because they provide you with a weapon to fight him that trivializes it a bit, but the spectacle of the fight was top notch. Using the Serpent Hunter to send blast after blast at this massive serpent was insanely cool. Mimics here isn't really a boss I see a lot of people talking about, but I just enjoyed that moment you go in and realize you have to fight yourself. Every overpowered move that you've been using on others is now going to get used on you, and it was just an interesting way to look at your build from a different perspective. The moment Godfrey turns into Horalu and becomes a WWE wrestler and starts suplexing you all over the arena was fantastic. Radahn was probably my favorite boss in the game. You can summon a bunch of people for the Radahn fight if you want, but I only summoned my two favorite NPCs, Blyde and Alexander. It was me and the boys versus General Radahn the Star Scourge, and it was an incredible moment. Radahn can be a pretty tough fight on top of that, which I always enjoy a challenge, and his move where he jumps into the air and comes at you as a fiery comet was great. Plus, I love the lore that he learned gravitational magic just so he could keep riding his favorite horse without crushing it by his weight. So those are just some of the bosses that I enjoyed, and I didn't even get to mention Malekith or Radagon or Elden Beast or Godric or so many others, but just know that this game has some fantastic bosses. Except for Malenia. Malenia can go and fuck.
I am Malenia, Blade of Miquella. I am Malenia, Blade of Miquella. I am Malenia, Blade of Miquella. I am Malenia, Blade.
Even though this is a video about why Elden Ring is a winner, I still think it's important to point out some of the flaws the game has. Now, I played on PC, so of course I have to talk about the PC performance. I have a pretty decent computer with a 3070 and an i7-10700 in it, which is not top of the line, but should still be able to run anything that I throw at it perfectly for a while. However, even people with top of the line computers are still experiencing frame dips. The frame dips for me didn't happen as much as others, but what did happen is the game locking up for a few seconds, and unfortunately, that was pretty consistent throughout my playthrough. I was having such a blast with the game, however, that it never really took me out of the world, but for a game where instant reactions are a necessity if you want to stay alive, the locking up is pretty disappointing and drops what would be a 10 out of 10 game for me to an 8 or 9 out of 10. That was my only big annoyance, but there are a couple other small things that I could mention. Not being able to open up the map while an enemy is aggro on you is pretty annoying because some of those enemies hold aggro for a while, even after you get away from them. Also, you'll notice that I haven't really talked story at all because From Software's stories are always hidden behind the lore and item descriptions for the people that want to get into it, but for the people who don't, then they can just play the game and ignore that stuff, which I like because it's just another thing that's in the player's hands and not the developers. However, did we really have to make this extra confusing with all the characters having similar names? Radahn, Radagon, Rennala, Godfrey, Godric, Godwyn, Melina, Malenia, Miquella. I swear Miyazaki and George R.R. Martin are off somewhere laughing about this one. This game has blown away most every one of my expectations for it. I think I can easily say that it will be my game of the year for 2022 and has already gone on my list of top 10 games of all time. From the beautifully created world to the fantastic design of the content in the open world or the deeply refined combat to fight all the bosses with, Elden Ring deserves all the praise that it is receiving. I honestly don't see where From Software can go from here. Obviously I want to see more from them, but I'm not sure you can top Elden Ring. Even with some of the problems that exist in the game, everything else that I mentioned exceeds those problems, and it is why Elden Ring is a winner.